Willkommen, Bienvenue, and welcome back to Duncombe House Diaries. It is supercalifragilistic to have you back with us. Now, there are two things that can almost be guaranteed here at Duncombe House. The first one is that every single job will take a minimum of twice as long as we think it will. The second is that it will, on a very regular basis, rain. Over the summer, we tried our very best to get the house at least reasonably weathertight. We had all of the sash windows repaired or replaced. We had the slip tiles unslipped. We unblocked every single one of the drains and removed, repainted and reinstated each and every one of the cast iron gutters and downpipes. You might recall Jazzy doing a stalwart job of pressure washing all of our downpipes back in the summer. Unfortunately, despite having a clear plan, as I mentioned a few moments ago, everything takes approximately twice as long as it should, so we still have all the exterior decorating and lots of pointing and flaunching to be done, which, due to the heritage materials that we are going to use, cannot be done until the weather improves somewhat. One job we have been meaning to get a wiggle on with, however, is repairing and replacing the gutter and downpipe on the northeast corner of the house. As I'm sure you are well aware, gutters collect water that runs off the roof, directs it to the downpipes, which then carry it to the drains around the house, whisking it away to some magical land where rainwater goes to live, preventing it from destroying the foundations of the house. Now, we actually have a very good example of what can begin to happen if rainwater isn't adequately sequestered. This drain was well and truly bunged up when we bought Duncombe House, and it's likely that the constant flow has damaged the old foundations, causing the entire porch to look a little inebriated. Luckily, however, the damage is really quite minor despite how it looks, and as long as we make sure that the damage doesn't get any worse, then this back porch should survive for many winters to come. When we took the downpipes off last summer, the idea of labelling them seemed entirely unnecessary. Fast forward 4 months, and lo and behold, we don't have a Scooby-Doo which ones go where. So after a little head scratching with Julian and some jiggery pokery, we finally got the gist and set about reattaching the gutter and the downpipe. Naturally, the temptation has been there to purchase all new cast iron gutters and downpipes. Far simpler, far quicker, far easier, and far, far more boring. As we always say here at Duncombe House, never let common sense get in the way of a good aesthetic. After I'd bent back the hanger which I'd clipped with the cherry picker in the summer, don't tell the hire company, the gutters went up with surprising ease, and everything was going suspiciously well until Jazzy decided to toss the £100 OX spirit level unceremoniously off the roof. Some things just can't be taught. One of the most peculiar parts of reattaching our ludicrously heavy downpipes is the actual fixings themselves. Originally, these downpipes were attached to the solid stone wall by drilling a hole, tapping in a wooden plug, and then whacking into that a 4-inch downpipe nail. Of course, hardly anyone uses this incredibly time-consuming and antiquated method anymore, which is exactly why we decided it was the method for us. In time, when the weather is better, we will take these downpipes all back off again and secure them using stone resin. But for the moment, whilst the weather is a touch pants, replacing them exactly how they were seems like a good plan to us. So it was off to the workshop to see what I could fashion. Now, I know in the last episode I haughtily and quite arrogantly preached the benefits of doing everything properly, but I'm nothing if not an exasperating hypocrite, and I am entirely aware of the irony of this bodget and scarper. Grandad, I'm very sorry, but we needed a quick fix. So I made up some wooden plugs from an old broom handle. Firstly, I expertly planed them down to size using entirely the wrong tool. Then I cut them to length using entirely the wrong saw. Drilled them out using entirely the wrong drilling setup, and then popped them in a little bubble bath to relax before whacking them into the old holes. Next up, it was time to prepare the old downpipes by removing the old corroded nail heads. Before you ask, obviously I'm wearing all the appropriate PPE, including, but not limited to, ski goggles, pith helmet, and earmuffs. Once that was all done, it was finally time to get these antiques nailed back onto the walls. Once the weather calms down and spring hath sprung, we will revisit all of these downpipes, repair all the remaining holes and the blown stonework, but for the moment, at least now when it rains, we won't get too wet. Love has well and truly been in the air here at Duncombe House this Valentine's Day. Now Quincy is a teenager, naturally boys are becoming a lot more interesting to her, but no one saw this coming. It may have been a bit of a slow burner, and like any well-brought-up lady of standing, she certainly kept him waiting, but it appears Borgia's charms are finally wearing her down. We would be very interested to know if any of you have had a similar situation, because although Quincy is obviously soft as grease, we were not expecting the cats and the dogs to get on quite this well. They've been gallivanting in the greenhouse, liaising on the lawn, and dancing on the doorstep. Quincy has been pretending to be preoccupied with her new stick collection, but in reality, her and Borgia are spending more and more time together. The reason I'm sure it must be real love is that she's even stopped scoffing down their food. How bizarre. Fear not, however, Dean is in no way being neglected. Unlike Borgia, who is limitlessly gregarious, Dean simply seems to prefer his own company and to forge his own path, which quite often seems to involve cobwebs for some reason. And it's not just Quincy who is growing up far too fast. Bree has decided she simply doesn't have the patience for us humans anymore and has therefore begun walking herself. Albeit, for now at least, round and round in circles. It has been awfully remiss of us thus far not to have introduced you all to Julian. Julian and his wife Sharon have been dear friends of the family for many years, and to our inexpressible relief, Julian is not only extremely handy, but he is preposterously hard-working and relentless in his willingness to help us out at Duncombe House. Real talk for a second. Doing Instagram and YouTube is terribly time-consuming, and although, as I've said many times before, we are genuinely adoring the bizarreness of sharing our lives and our renovation with you all, having Julian here to keep the wheels on the bus going round and round is an absolute godsend. This past week, he's been gallantly marching on with the preparation of the front door, which we very much hope to have rehung in the not too distant. Before we do, we're just trying to source some traditional copper drafting strip and to make sure that we use all the correct cleaning products on the old lock. Now, of course, we could have gone out and bought a brand spanking new security lock for the door, but then we wouldn't be able to use this bonkers front door key, which naturally we absolutely love. To conclude, we are extremely fortunate to have Julian lending us a hand at the house. So after me, all hail King Julian. Thank you all so very much for sharing your preferences for the Duncan House Interiors starting point. We have a monumental task of repairing all of the plumbing and electrical installations prior to actually starting on the fluffy stuff. But it will be upon us before we know it, which is why we wanted to get a head start and begin the design process. Many of you have very astutely noticed that at present we don't actually have much of a kitchen space here at Duncan House. That is certainly a head scratcher, I assure you, and a challenge surrounded by lots and lots of ideas. We will be sharing all of these ideas with you in good time, but as so many of you rightly pointed out, the WC is probably the best place to start. Our downstairs WC will be the only restroom on the ground floor of Duncan House. This makes it extremely important for us to well manage the space. For example, if in the future we have guests for whom stairs are perhaps not a possibility, this room must provide them with all the required comforts. Unfortunately, it's not really big enough for a bath, Jazzy's favourite hobby. However, we certainly feel that the addition of a shower would be appropriate and could ensure the future comfort and independence of all our guests. I suppose our style is quite timeless and traditional. We do certainly have quite a weakness, however, when it comes to luxury fixtures and fittings. If you were to ask us for our own design inspiration, Jazzy would likely say that she favours a mixture of restoration hardware meets plain English meets the Ned Hotel. If you asked me, I'd probably say that in an ideal world, our house would resemble something like a cross between the British Museum, the Victoria and Albert, and the RAC. We will find a middle ground, I'm sure. The downstairs WC measures 2 meters by 2 meters and has a magnificent view out of the window into the garden. In the summer, this entire bank is blessed with the most magnificent pink hydrangeas, affording this WC an enviable vista. At present, the main drain soil pipe is located here. And as we see no real reason to move it, this is likely where we will position the throne. Then we just need to decide where the sink, the shower, and the feature towel rail and radiator will go, and how best to decorate this lovely little space. Our current thinking is to place the sink opposite the toilet on this north wall here. This will hopefully afford us enough space to then position a corner shower next to it right here. We will then be left with the perfect space for a towel radiator, because no one, and I mean no one, enjoys a cold towel in the winter. Of course, the superstar of this little room is already in place. Anything that we decide to do with the downstairs WC will have to play second fiddle to the mesmerizing blue terrazzo marble floor. We're going to go into a lot more detail on terrazzo, I assure you, but for now, all you need to know is that we love the stuff. We've put together a few ideas from our Pinterest, which, on a side note, we'd be delighted to see you join us on. I put the link in the description. We are not married to any specific design ideas per se, so the possibilities really are quite endless. We'd love to know what you think of these design themes. whether you've got any bathroom recommendations or perhaps bathroom reservations, and if you can think of a better way to configure our downstairs necessary room. After several particularly Baltic days at the house, I flippantly passed a comment that it might be nice to try and cook some hot lunches on the old log burner. Needless to say, this idea was received with some rapture from Jazzy, who suffers quite badly from the affliction of hunger. Valentine's Day seemed like the perfect occasion for our inaugural foray into log burner cookery. So I decided that although a soufflé or a handmade croissant might be nice, both would have been far too easy and far too obvious. The only option was, of course, the notoriously challenging, deeply romantic and playfully elegant pomme de terre au four et haricots, or, in English, a jacket potato with baked beans and cheese. First things first, I got the old La Nordica up to the perfect temperature for cooking. Exactly how hot, you ask? Well, I have absolutely no idea because we don't actually have a thermometer, but if I had to guess, I would say around 7 out of 10 hot. After a good bayoneting, I wrapped our tatties in some good old extra thick silver foil, carefully raked the hot embers over to one side and popped the tatties into the fiery depths of Mordor. Despite having no idea whatsoever how long they might take, for some reason, at this stage I also decided to set a timer. Whilst they were baking away, I prepared by hand and entirely from scratch the haricot à la sauce tomate, and added it to our perfectly on-brand Valentine's Day Le Cruzo, which Jazzy's mother very kindly lent us specifically for the occasion. After about an hour, Jazzy was starting to show the early signs of hunger, so we decided, regardless of how well cooked they might be, it was time to get a wiggle on. Naturally, I've cooked potatoes in a campfire hundreds of times before, but this was genuinely the first time I've attempted it in a wood-burning stove, and goodness gracious on a gondola, I can't begin to tell you how well it worked. In the end, it took approximately 64 minutes for the potatoes to be baked to perfection, which, seeing as I haven't provided you with an accurate temperature, is entirely useless and superfluous information. We favour the traditional method of serving our baked potatoes here at Duncombe House, so after adding a very healthy slab of salted butter, a little black pepper, and a sprinkling of sea salt, it was time to unleash a cascade of heavenly haricots. Under no circumstances whatsoever forget, on top of that, a full fistful of cheese. And just like that, you can not only create a devastatingly romantic Valentine's Day meal, but also entirely prevent mid-afternoon hunger. C'est magnifique. We decided to treat ourselves to an afternoon of rummaging last week. Now that might sound a bit odd, but we have to ration the treasure hunting here at Duncombe House. If we were to succumb to our base desires, we would do approximately 0 renovation and 100% treasure hunting. So we have come up with a clever little system. After doing hard jobs, or as we call it, after eating some frogs, we reward ourselves by going through a box or two of gallimaufry. We had an overwhelmingly positive response to our most recent Treasure Tuesday. Duncombe House is 200 years old, and the family who lived in the house before us had a highly distinguished past. It is worth noting that we knew this family well before we bought Duncombe House and are still in regular contact with them. They saved a huge amount of history before selling the house to us, but the sheer volume of treasure which she holds means that inevitably some bits were missed. As we go through the place, room by room, sharing all of our finds, anything which we think might be meaningful to the previous owners, we put aside so that they can decide if they'd like to keep it or not. Enter the Lost Diaries. Duncombe House is jam-packed full of old books. Some literally hundreds of years old, and we are yet to scratch the surface of this rich vein of literary ore. Our most recent expedition into antiquity rewarded us with an insane collection of books, the absolute highlight of which were these 2 diaries. Written between 1877 and 1883, they document the daily life of a Mr. J.B. Thornley, who we understand may have been a lay preacher and part of the temperance movement. There is a very high chance that we are the very first people to see and hear these words since they were imagined and documented by Mr. Thornley 146 years ago. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a true and exclusive privilege. Join me now as we travel back to 1879 and peek together through the window of time. Now, it appears from his records that on Valentine's Day in 1879, I wonder if they celebrated Valentine's Day in 1879. Anybody know? Anyway, Mr. Thornley made 13 visits, which, as he is a man of the church, we will assume were professional. The following week, however, looks to be a lot more interesting. Week ending February the 21st, 94 visits. Sick visits, 8. In one of the houses that I visited, I encountered a man who, by reason of his erroneous opinions on religious matters, is calculated to do a great deal of harm to the minds of the members of the house in which he is a lodger, and who is a rigid Calvinist. He believes also in purgatory and in repentances unto life beyond the grave and many other strange and foolish things. To the benefit of those who live in the house, I went through the arguments by which we disprove these silly statements. In my visits, I came across a young woman who is a backslider. She told me that she was once a member at Longside, but she has ceased to meet in class for some years. Before I left, she promised to come to class again. Well, Mr. Thornley, thank goodness that the good people of your parish had your piety to lean on. These diaries make up a truly important part of the history of the family who lived in Duncombe House before us, and as a result, we will be returning them so that they can read them and enrich their own family archives. Family is extraordinarily important to both Jazzy and I, so it was delightful to have my uncle, auntie and grandmother up to visit last weekend. They travelled for almost 4 hours from down south up to Staffordshire to come and say hello. Their trip was primarily dominated, as these family affairs often are, by eating and then looking forward to and planning the next meal. My grandmother, who won't mind me telling you, is now north of 90 and never better. So when I offered her a go in Rob's Polaris, she did not hesitate for a second. Once I'd microwaved her hot wheat bag and got her a blanket, she was ready to rock. The two of us had a brilliant time tazzing about the local area, checking out all the flora and fauna and generally having a hoot. Even after all of this excitement, she still found time to do an obligatory puzzle. Now, does anybody know where this is? We had a spectacularly weird evening visiting the Sing for Your Supper event at the Bullshed restaurant just over the border from us in Derbyshire last week. The fabulously warm crowd welcomes young and old to sing a song in return for dinner. And although, to be totally honest, we weren't entirely sure what we were getting ourselves in for, we soon got into the spirit of things, and in return for a delicious bowl of alpine stew, my very good friend Stephen and I decided to perform an entirely average rendition of Stan Rogers' The North-West Passage.
Taking one warm line through a land so wide and savage.
I had to make an emergency day trip down to London, ostensibly to do some work, but in reality we just needed to get some decent tea. For those of you who may have missed it, we also released on Friday the first of our brand new Duncan House dog walks. You were all so kind about our dog walk chapters in previous episodes that we decided to create a full-length video of our favourite dog walk. In the video, we potter past open fields, ancient quarries, mysterious woodlands and roaring rivers. The idea behind the video is very simple. We just wanted to offer you all some 100% organic, entirely AI and CGI-free relaxation content. The video can be used to help you have a relaxing start, middle or finish to your day, whether you use it for some conscious and focused relaxation or simply pop it on in the background whilst you enjoy a cup of tea or busy about with your chores. We poured a lot of time and love into the video, so please do give it a go and let us know, as always, how we can improve. Ladies and gentlemen, to every single one of you across the globe, as the world spins madly on, thank you ever so much for once again joining us for a little bit of nonsense. We will see you again very soon. TTFN.